He rode to assert her father's land. However, the female volunteered herself rather, whispering, "Simply spare him. Montana Territory, early spring, 1885. The fog rolled in heavy from the east and swallowed the hills quietly. The air changed into scented with pine, frost, and distance. Caleb, useless, rode slowly via it, his horse's breath ghosting at the bloodless. He became 31, his large shoulders underneath a tattered army duster, a revolver strapped to his hip. From his saddle bag, the nook of a crumpled paper, poked out a land deed stamped by using the federal office in Helena. 80 acres bought with smooth cash owned through Wright. He had said it to himself a dozen times on the drive over right here. He wasn't stealing, he become retrieving what legally belonged to him. The war had taught him to consider in things written, signed, and sealed, rather than the memories of who became first, or who had labored extra. Before them, a fence line broke through the mist, half of rotted, however upright. Beyond that, a cabin leaned against the hump of a touch hill. The spot regarded worn down, chimney leaning, roof patched with tin and hope. However, out of it, a skinny, stubborn thread of smoke flickered. He slid off the horse, boots settling into wet earth. The arena held its breath, except for the slow creak of leather and the wind's sigh via grasses. He approached the porch. Someone stepped into the road of sight. For a second he notioned it turned into a boy. Then the fog dropped away and he noticed her. A young girl not more than her mid-20s, gaunt, with a sort of energy that changed into the maid from toil, no longer privilege. She wore a diminished get-dressed. The hem became frayed, her fingers uncooked and crimson from hard work. Locks of chestnut hair had escaped a braid that fell to her shoulder. She faced him squarely, wide and pink eyes from crying. Caleb paused, one gloved hand at the paper in his coat. "I am searching for Jeremiah Dunn," he said. "This is his home." Her voice broke when she spoke back. It turned into, he nodded. "Then hell need to look this." She remained nevertheless. The wind whipped at her braid and swept it across her face. While she resumed talking, her voice was so low it nearly dissolved into the fog. "Please," she stated. He scowled. "Ma'am," she swallowed difficult. "Please just let him live." He blinked, now not sure he'd heard correctly. "Take me." The paper remained in his pocket. His hand dropped to his side. She stood shaking, though her eyes failed to drop. There has been no disgrace in her tone, most effective desperation. A fierce, silent type that would no longer shatter. Caleb glanced beyond her to the cabin. Smoke endured to boost from the chimney. Someone was making their manner in. A shadow leaned over, slow and intentional. "Your father's right here," he stated. She nodded. "He is ill. The physician says his heart might not continue to exist another wintry weather." Her lips quivered. "If you get him to move, it'll kill him." Caleb released his breath slowly. "I don't want to harm everyone. I paid for this land, honest and consistent with law." She improved, her boots sinking into the mud. "The law has no concept what this value us." Her voice trembled now. He cleared the passages himself, dug each hollow for the posts. He framed that roof himself. Caleb's eyes fell to her blistered fingers, her nails rimmed with dirt. The cuffs of her sleeves were repaired with mismatched thread. "You're his daughter," he stated softly. Rosalind Dunn." She nodded. Her eyes have been vibrant, raw, consistent. For a long moment there was no speak. The best noise was the wind with the faint rattle of a barn door, somewhere out inside the fog. Caleb at closing stated, "I'm no longer a man who steals people's homes for fun." "Then don't thieve this one," she whispered. "Take me, permit him stay on the hill till he dies. He has no other vicinity." He backed away uncomfortably. "I don't sell human beings. I failed to ask you to." She spoke back. "Handiest spare him." Her phrases hung there like smoke. Caleb slowly faced his horse. "I will return day after today," he stated. Rosen did now not circulate, did not explicit gratitude. She just stood there, a white ghost in the fog, her fists at her aspects. As he climbed and rode off, he seemed returned once. The cabin become little more than a shadow now, a darkish form in opposition to the white. But her voice lingered behind him, smooth and pressing. weaving through the mist like a prayer he could not shake. Please, simply take him. Permit me cross as an alternative. Morning sunlight split the timber, casting mild out over the rim of the ridge, in which earth gave manner to rocky, thin soil. Caleb Vane stood next to the pony he had tied at the edge of the Dunn property boundary. The prison deed spread in his fingers. He had come again, as he had said. The cabin seemed smaller, nevertheless, within the mild, sagging in spots. Chickens scratched close to a crooked porch. An area of barley rippled inside the breeze, its furrows uneven, worked by way of hands without the posh of tools. From the door got here a man, thin solar darkened, leaning closely on a strolling stick. His white hair stuck to his temples in streaks, and his breath wheezed with every step. But his eyes, light and sharp, watched Caleb like a hawk. "You have to be carried out," Caleb stated. "Jeremiah," stated the old guy. Caleb supplied the paper. This land became reallocated by means of the federal office remaining fall, bought prison with the aid of auction. "I am best right here to settle it proper." Jeremiah did no longer even look at the paper. "I labored every rattling direction in this hill with my personal 2 fingers. My wife handed away in this land. She's below a willow out yonder. That paper method nothing to me." Caleb stiffened. "I recognize your paintings, but the law stands." The regulation didn't wreck its lower back breaking stones for 12 winters, Jeremiah stated softly. Rosalind came out of the barn carrying a load of firewood. She stopped when she noticed them, her gaze passing from the paper in Caleb's hand to her father's tightened jaw. She said nothing, simply continued on her way closer to the residence. Caleb saw the quiver in her hands, one among her fingers become bandaged in a material strip, dry blood staining it. Her sleeves were inconsistently repaired, patched with tattered flour sack. Even the pony tied up via the barn regarded underfed. They were not preserving the land out of delight. They simply didn't have anywhere else to head. That nighttime, Caleb went again to his canvas tent, set just beyond the southern boundary where the government surveyor had driven in a boundary submit. He made a small fireplace, boiled espresso, and allowed the silence penetrate him. About nightfall he heard tender footsteps. He grew to become. Rosalind stood at the edge of the mild, carrying a tin plate wrapped in cloth and a small jar. "I delivered you something," she said. He hesitated, then stepped back to allow her closer. She set the plate on a stump beside his fireplace. "Baked it this morning. Cornmeal and honey and espresso." "Not tons, however she allow it cross." Caleb nodded. "Thank you." She stood there, palms folded, arms massaging her elbows. Her braid became undone this night. A strand hung towards her cheek, and she or he failed to push it back. "Your father's a proud guy," Caleb said after a moment, Rosalind's voice become low. "He constructed this vicinity from not anything. Every inch of it. While Mama died, he just saved on constructing." Silence stretched out once more. The fireplace cracked, after which she said it smooth, however firm. "If you take this land, he's going to die." Caleb swallowed. She took a breakthrough. "But if I continue to be, if I go along with you, may want you permit him to maintain the higher ridge, simply that." Caleb stood there, looking at her. "You are no longer something to barter." "I am not bartering. I'm asking." He backed off. "I don't purchase human beings. I recognize." They stood there like that, flames flickering between them. Then Caleb picked up the plate of cornbread and ate quietly, taking a chunk. Rosalind set free a breath. "I need to pass," she stated. Caleb failed to attain out to forestall her. However, he did not summon the sheriff either. And while she vanished into the darkness, he watched the spot wherein she'd been standing lengthy after the fire went out. The sunrise came cold, the sort that seeped through canvas and settled inside the bones. Caleb Vane sat in his tent. The parchment of land rights crumpled between his arms. He had studied it a dozen times on account that coming, each line stenciled with official stamps, legal words, dates, and a single call, his. It turned into all purported to be smooth land bought honest, claimed prison, but not anything about this land seemed easy. Now he looked at the define of the ridge past the canvas flap, wherein smoke curled from the Dunn's chimney. A part of him, the soldier who accompanied orders, who drew smooth strains and enforced them, instructed him to evict them, move on. Any other element, quieter however deeper, held the image of Rosalind's eyes the night before. Her voice had no longer been irritated. It had been uncooked. Empty of fight, full of something tougher to define. That afternoon, Caleb rode into city, boots kicking dirt along the path to the blacksmith's forge. The person at the anvil, shoulders huge, beard streaked with gray, regarded up whilst he got herein. You useless, the blacksmith asked. Caleb nodded. I am staying out close to the done location. The person grunted. Lot of records on that land. I heard Jeremiah Dunn's a tough guy. He is an awesome one, the blacksmith stated, wiping sweat from his brow. Fed drifters throughout the drought. Buried of his own youngsters out there. In no way requested for help, just kept the land going. Caleb, you watched. I'm incorrect to be there. Paper and sweat don't agree the identical, the blacksmith said. It is now not for me to mention. Out of doors the wind multiplied. Caleb installed his horse, heart burdened heavier than when he'd arrived. That night, as the solar made shadows long throughout the ridge, he noticed her again. Rosalind stood near the river, leading their sole horse through shallow water. The animal limped. She stopped to rest it, her hand sweeping throughout its mane. Her sleeves were ripped again, her braid undone, her toes bare. She didn't appearance up. She failed to note him watching. He realized then she wasn't younger enough any longer to watch for hire. Something chances she may have had, love, domestic, protection, were exchanged for days spent sunburned and nights worrying for a father who should infrequently walk. She had come inclined, not out of desperation or affection, but resignation. That reality hit Caleb more difficult than any bullet. The following morning, Caleb came again to the southern fringe of the land. He did not know what he'd say, if whatever, but the sight before him precipitated him to rein short. Rosalind stood by the antique fence, hammer in her hand, hammering a new stake into the ground. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her face become set company, but the line she became hammering become in blunders. One of the posts were set simply 2 feet beyond the authorities' marker, legally onto land now unique as Caleb's. He dismounted. She failed to waver while she noticed him, only endured hammering. I realize it's yours, she stated, no longer looking at him. I'm no longer asking to maintain onto it. I just want a few extra time. The hammer fell to her hip. She dabbed sweat from her brow with the back of her wrist, cheeks rosy from the warmth of morning. My father's respiratory higher again. We're given to get in 1 extra harvest before frost sets in. After that we will go away? Caleb said not anything right away. He glanced at the put-up, then her blistered palms, clenched jaw, standing as although anticipating him to yell, but he failed to. He simply nodded as soon as, rose and blinked, thinking if she'd simply imagined it. She resumed selecting up the hammer once more, slower this time, her frame enjoyable simply enough to show off remedy. Caleb became and walked away to his horse. No words spoken, no vows uttered, most effective a silent knowledge based totally not on law, but on something firmer, something steep-like. The wagon that got here into the valley turned into painted deep brass, inexperienced and brass with a shined logo from Philadelphia etched into the side. The horses shone, the driver became gloved, and within sat a man who bore the heady scent of cigar smoke and inked documents. Morgan Useless had come. He changed into Caleb's cousin, years older and lots richer, a son of the land who became baron from again east and negotiated in whiskey and gazed over maps like a hungry hawk. He had financed Caleb's land claim with one stipulation. As soon because the Dunns had been eliminated from the land, it would be sold to him, part of a greater plan for acquisition of the valley that become the settlement. However, Morgan saw reluctance now in Caleb's eyes. The day he had come, he climbed down from the wagon in his metropolis boots and regarded around with disgust on the hills, the mended fences, and the dirt under absolutely everyone's fingernails. You were supposed to power them out, Morgan stated, slamming his gloves on Caleb's table out of doors the tent. Now I listen you playing house with the daughter. Caleb did not solution. Morgan moved in, low and tough, her voice. You came here to own, no longer fall for a few dust-bad female who reeks of sap. Or have you long gone and forgotten what we are constructing? Caleb's jaw clenched. He became once more to the put-up he becomes sawing. Morgan curled her lip and stood up immediately. Tender like your father. That evening the primary caution. Jeremiah Dunn awoke to the sight of a part of his fence aflame. Next morning, Morgan's cattle strayed onto Dunland, trampling bean shoots, scattering the hens. No phrase of apology, only Morgan standing at the rise, tipped hat low, cold eyes. Caleb witnessed it all, but he spoke not. Yet, no longer of worry or acquiescence. He discovered, calculated, waited, as if balancing something extra tangible than mere land. Rosalind turned into withdrawn. She walked past Caleb's tent because the solar changed into setting one evening. In her grasp was a bowl no larger than her 2 arms and blanketed with cloth. She did not say a phrase. Handiest positioned it softly at the crate beside his tent flap, then grew to become and departed, her braid jogging down her again like a line of dirt. Within the bowl become earless, easen corn porridge, nevertheless warm. Caleb sat subsequent to it. For an hour without ever laying a hand to it. The steam evaporated, the bowl grew cool. The subsequent morning, while the solar crested over the ridge, Caleb introduced again the bowl, now easy, set lightly on her doorstep, knocked as soon as, departed earlier than she opened the door. Morgan saw the transaction. Charming, he sneered at breakfast. You consider sentiment can nourish you whilst the wintry weather arrives. Caleb remained silent, but his hand, mendacity on the desk, clenched into a fist. Morgan's stress endured. He sent his guys to stampede the movement mattress, which furnished the Dunn's irrigation channel. He allowed rumors to be surpassed that Jeremiah had trespassed, spreading falsehood through the metropolis saloon. He went to the sheriff, losing tips of a belligerent elder protecting onto land that no longer belonged to him. But Caleb remained silent, not when Jeremiah's barn roof collapsed from an unfastened beam, now not whilst Rosalind got here lower back from the market and located her woven baskets cut. Now not even when Morgan sneered over dinner and remarked, "Nobody recalls terrible people, Caleb. They most effective don't forget who holds the deed." However, Caleb turned into remembering the whole thing. He saw how Rosalind escorted her father to his chair with both fingers underneath his fingers. He noticed how she mended her very own get-dressed cuffs with the remnants of thread from fixing saddles. He watched how she scraped cornmeal right into a can for the widow 2 farms down. She wasn't striking on to land for delight. She turned into retaining it because it was the best thing that ever held her. One day, as Morgan's employed men had been about to increase fencing traces past the antique right along the circulation, Caleb stood in their manor, silent, gunned, and nevertheless. Morgan rode up in the back of him. "What in the Satan are you doing?" he growled. Caleb did now not turn his head, thinking. Morgan snarled, then think in a rush. "I want this valley cleared." Caleb dropped his hand to the butt of his revolver. "I am," he instructed her. "I simply do not know that you may care for what I pick." And for the first time in view that Morgan's arrival, it turned into he who faltered. Caleb, useless, quiet and calculated, was no longer unsure. He changed into merely now not yet completed. They woke up to a line of white scorched. Across the floor, salt spilled heavy and intentional like a wound down the dun circle of relatives' best crop row. Rosen gazed at it in silence. Jeremiah knelt at its facet, tracing the lifeless earth together with his hands. The shoulders of the vintage guy shook, not with anger, but with something slower, deeper. Rosalind assisted him into the house, but his steps faltered. Within a couple of minutes he fell at the side of the fire. His lips have been waxen. His respiration was shallow. Rosalind screamed. The medical doctor arrived from city, out of breath. "Moderate infarction," he muttered. "He requires relaxation, fewer cares, warm broth, and calmness. Tranquility on naked land." Rosalind slipped a shawl onto her shoulders and departed the cabin without a phrase that night. Moon became low, bloodless mild, throwing shadows through the pines. Her arms shook with each rap upon Caleb's tent pole. He opened the flap, eyes extensive, blouse unfastened over his shoulders, boots 1/2 laced. She stood before him, hair unbound, breath misting. "He's demise," she murmured. "He might not last some other week of this." Caleb moved apart, let her in. She didn't sit down. She stood beside the lantern, fists balled. "I know who's doing it, Morgan." No one else might take some time to salt land in the dead of night. He did now not reply, but his face set. Rosalind's voice cracked. "You introduced him." Caleb seemed away. "I did." Her phrases Next came Jagged, and now he's going to kill us. He glanced at her. Now not anymore. The next day, Morgan swaggered into Metropolis, giggling with ranch palms, spinning a coin on his knuckles. His hat become cocked too a long way lower back, and he leaned too closely at the word mine. Caleb stood at the porch of the Deliver store. As Morgan rode with the aid of, Caleb said nothing. He swung. The punch hit Morgan's cheek squarely, sending the hat flying off his head. Morgan came again fast. Ex-boxer, fast palms. However, Caleb boxed like he had no cause to show something, and the entirety. To guard, they alternated punches in the dust, fists assembly ribs, jaws, knees bent, backs arched. Dust billowed like a flare fire. Humans came. Nobody stopped them. Morgan had Caleb's blouse in his arms, snarling, "She's now not well worth this." Caleb brought his brow crashing into Morgan's. Blood, enamel on the ground. "She's well worth greater than you will ever be," he snarled. They crashed into the water trough, shattering the edge, drenching each. Morgan pulled a knife. Caleb grabbed his wrist and twisted it savagely. The blade fell to the floor. Morgan attacked again, best to have the business give up of a shotgun rammed up into his eyes. The sheriff, he uttered one phrase, enough. Morgan became taken into custody that day, technically for disrupting the peace, informally for being a condescending son of a complain. The city had reached its tolerance restrict for his payoffs, his veiled threats, his burnt earth. Through night, the educate whistle howled. Morgan changed into eliminated with a bruised lip and cracked ribs. Caleb stood inside the center of Fundamental Street, blouse ripped, blood on his temple, right eye swelling closed. He did not stumble. Rosalind observed him there. She did not say a word. He failed to require her to. He seemed her as even though every of the swings he'd thrown become a word in a sentence that he couldn't speak aloud. But she heard it although, inside the corner of the square, Jeremiah sat on a bench, blanketed with a wool blanket. His face turned into faded, however he became alive. Caleb escorted him home that night. Time, step by using slow step. No land changed into bought, but something else had, and it become extra enduring than paper. The ash line from the fire nevertheless disfigured the sphere's side. Blackened posts jutting like damaged enamel from the floor. Caleb got up earlier than dawn and set to work. He bore alternative beams on his shoulder. He dug new holes for the posts. He stamped down the earth along with his boot, back immediately and silent. From her window, Rosen found. No one had asked this of him. He fixed the whole line of fence by way of noon, sweat into his collar. Then he picked up seed, his own, and strolled the rows along Jeremiah's porch, curving bent, losing bean by means of bean into the soil. He did not say something to Rosalind while she introduced water. He just nodded once, then endured sewing. That night, Jeremiah asked for his coat. He had stood by myself for the first time in weeks. His voice became firmer, though nevertheless vulnerable. Inform him I want to peer him, he advised. Caleb appeared, swiping dirt from his sleeves. He stood beside Jeremiah's chair, now not understanding what to anticipate. Jeremiah failed to stand up. He stared Caleb straight within the eyes. "If you have come right here to scouse borrow," he stated, "then I reckon you have got." Caleb braced himself. Jeremiah went on, "Now not the land, now not my daughter, now not even my peace." He gestured towards the bean rows with a trembling hand. "You took something harder to win." Caleb scowled. "What is that?" "My agree with." The phrases floated within the air between them, as delicate as spun sugar, "and I'm no longer a man who offers that effortlessly," Jeremiah said. Caleb's throat tightened. "I wasn't, I recognize," Jeremiah interrupted. "That's why it matters." That week, Caleb rode up the North Ridge along with his papers. He took readings, scouted out the slope, delivered again rocks, stake boundary lines. He summoned Rosalind out and indicated the ridge. "This half of," he stated, "I shall reserve for planting, for dwelling." He stood up to stand her. "The opposite 1/2 stays yours." "Your father all the time." Rosalind gazed at him. "You're returning it to me." "I am taking best what I have to," Caleb responded. "Not what I may additionally." She did not respond, no longer verbally, but the following day, simply at twilight, she appeared at his cabin. She was not weeping. She did now not put off. In her hands she clutched a rectangular of worn pale green fabric at its corners, embroidered in looping choppy thread. She laid it on the table in front of him. "My mother sewed this," she stated. "Before she died, she stated to me once, if I ever came throughout a man who maintained his dignity while no one would fault him for dropping it to offer him this. Caleb didn't contact it. She leaned forward, her tone softened. I am giving it to you. He touched his fingertips to the threshold. The cloth felt soft, elderly and actual. So I did take something in spite of everything, he whispered. Rosalind smiled faintly. Only what you earned. Out of doors. Wind expanded. It had the smell of grew to become earth and the approaching rain. For the first time considering his arrival, Caleb Vane did not experience he become a trespasser. Now not in subject, now not within the cabin, no longer in her eyes, but a man who had arrived with not anything, and observed something to stay for. Spring arrived overdue to the valley, with shoots of green down the furrows and warmth that thawed the frostbitten ground. Caleb and Rosalind labored the land as if they had executed it forever, shoulder-to shouldered, however never a line unstated. They did not stay beneath the same roof, but they shared the dawn. Rosen would go away on the step outdoor Caleb's cabin every morning, a tin cup of coffee. On occasion it'd be steaming, different times it'd have long gone cold earlier than he may want to get to it, but he drank all of it, usually. For this, in turn, he cut a high-quality plank of pine. On it he wrote her call with sluggish strokes. Rosalind, he pinned it to the boundary fences area, going through each of their houses. It spoke now not of possession, but of presence. They swede seed in silence and concord. Caleb wore sacks of barley slung on his return. Rosalind made lines inside the soil with a steady hand. Whilst Jeremiah turned into capable to stroll, they took turns supporting him to the wagon on Sundays, using him down into Metropolis, church bell ringing like a heartbeat out across the valley. At the general store, they accompanied them with whispers, now not hush ones, however nosy, muttering matters. They ain't married, no ring, no declaration in the paper, but he brings her sugar every Friday, and she or he upkeep his coat. To folks who inquired, Rosalind had little to mention. She smiled, bobbed her head, and went approximately her work. Afternoon, Solar beat down on Caleb as he loaded a crate of seed right into a borrowed wagon. An vintage man with a dusty hat leaned on the hitch rail, eyeing him closely. The person squinted. You're the one from the east, the Vane boy. It truly is proper, Caleb answered, brushing off his sleeves. The man jabbed a thumb closer to the hill. That land you're on. Yours, is it? Caleb paused. A breeze lifted his collar. He looked up at the slope, the furrows strolling in neat rows, the fence rebuilt, the little flag of cloth Rosalind had tied to the gate where birds on occasion landed. He smiled, just a little. It's not mine. The person blinked. You paid for it, did you now not? I did. Then whose is it? Caleb hefted the crate into the wagon and turned, leaning on the side rail. It belongs to people who plant it, he stated. Who water it, who wake earlier than mild, and are available home after dark. That land answers to their arms, now not a deed. The antique guy rubbed his beard, then nodded slowly. Not many say that. Caleb gave a single shrug. No longer many understand. He tipped his hat and drove off. That night, Rosalind brought sparkling bread. She left it, in a clean towel by way of his door. In return, she found a small package wrapped in oil pores and skin on her very own step the subsequent morning. Internal, a knife along with her initials carved into the deal with, balanced just proper for her grip. No phrases, no notes, but everything changed into understood. Their lives ran parallel, tethered by means of labor and land, no longer bound by way of papers or vows, however through desire, made fresh each morning. On the nicely, youngsters called them Mr. Caleb and pass over Rosalind. At church they sat close to, but not too close. Whilst Rosalind sang, Caleb once in a while closed his eyes. And when spring broke into complete bloom with barley sprouting and the primary beans curling up from the soil, the city's parents stopped asking questions. They simply started out calling that reach of ridge the Dun Vane line, now not for possession, but for what had grown there and what kept growing. A year had exceeded. The July sun gilded the valley in golden mild. Fields as soon as dry and uncertain, now shimmered with blooming plants. Wheat, corn, and beans swayed in rhythm with the wind. At the brink of the land, near the dusty path that led via the mountains, stood a modest roadside forestall. Rosen had built it herself. Vacationers paused there now, for the cornbread, heat, flaky, touched with honey, for the analyzing lessons she gave to neighborhood children below the shade of the canvas awning, for the testimonies shared over black espresso poured through a lady with weathered palms and consistent eyes, who smiled now not out of dependency, but out of peace. Caleb sat at the front steps of the cabin, carving a fence post from pine, his blouse turned into dwindled from months underneath the solar, sleeves rolled up, his hair turned into longer now, brushing the lower back of his neck. His gaze, as soon as flinty and fierce, had softened into something deeper, just like the quiet at the bottom of a properly. That afternoon, as cicadas hummed in the timber, Rosalind got here to face beside him. She watched the fence line stretch towards the hills in which wild flora now grew untamed. Then she stated softly, "You came right here to take. What do you believe you studied of it all now?" Caleb stopped carving. He gazed out in the direction of the vintage Dunn homestead, wherein Jeremiah sat in a domestic-made rocker on the porch, gazing over a pair of giggling grandchildren who had visited with their parents from town. Caleb brushed shavings from his hands and said, "I think a few matters aren't supposed to be taken. Some things are first straight left untold." The wedding changed into subdued. No church bells, no lace veil, no silver jewelry, simply standing barefoot inside the subject they'd preserved, hands clasped beneath the huge Wyoming sky. The preacher in town grinned as he opened his book, tipping his hat at the collection of acquainted faces. Ranchers, schoolmarms, blacksmiths, and solid boys. By no means witnessed a pair signal a marriage with this many smiles, he stated, and it became sufficient. Later that week at the county clerk's workplace, Caleb traded the land deed and signed a new one. Half of it now examined Rosalind done useless. Not out of duty, no longer out of debt. However, out of reverence. "You earned each inch of this land lengthy before I came along," Caleb said, watching her sign with firm hands. She did now not talk, simply nodded, then inserted her hand into his, harvest time back. Collectively they sowed fresh seeds, this time not best for sustenance, however, for the destiny. They labored aspect with the aid of facet under the cool autumn sky, sowing with arms that had skilled, each struggling in restoration. Rosen's snickers sounded frequently, shrill and natural as bells. Caleb responded with gentle glances, a thumb towards her cheek, the mild knock of his hat upon her forehead, whilst a tourist through town stopped on the vintage rancher and inquired, "So who does own that property now?" The man simply gestured to the hillside in which two figures stooped low towards the ground, a basket of seeds among them. Rosen glanced up, smiled, and leaned into the shoulder of Caleb. She replied unhesitant. It changed into for the ones who had selected each other, no longer for land, however for romance. And the wind took her words across the field in which no title changed into capable of attain and no regulation to bind, simplest coronary heart, soil, and two people who now knew what it turned into like to remain. And for this reason upon a chunk of land no name becomes capable of bind, nor no law to maintain. Hearts built something now not of bricks, however of grace, unstated, unshaken, and in the long run earned. Caleb arrived to take what he believed changed into his, however what he observed become well worth greater. A existence he in no way predicted. A love he did now not insist upon, and a girl who gave freely handiest when she wished. If this tale moved you, if it reminded you that love isn't always loud, but it constantly leaves roots, then move ahead and press that hype button, enroll in Wild West love tales, and ring that bell, so you by no means pass over any other story from the dusty roads and quiet miracles of the Yankee frontier. Undefined until next time, trip steady and love braver.